I'll breeze through this story about the birth of the Fed put very quickly. When Alan Greenspan, on October the 19th, 1987, was in an airplane on his way to Dallas, Texas. The stock market crashed 23+%. We've never seen a percentage decline like that in the stock market since or before that. And as soon as he landed, he was informed. Somebody rushed to him from the Dallas Federal Reserve, my former employer, for 9 years throughout the crisis, and said, "Sir, while you were in the air, the stock market crashed." So he never made it to the podium the next morning, and raced back to Washington, D.C. to ensure the world that the Federal Reserve was going to backstop. Probably didn't use that word, but that's what it ended up being, right? It ended up being the birth of the Fed put, that the Fed was going to backstop investor losses by protecting the banking and financial systems. He started leaking information in the weeks and months that followed. This is prior to any Fed statement, chairman at the podium, no statement even. But before Fed injections of liquidity into the system, he just whispered in the ears of Wall Street bond desks and let them know in advance. And that's when they started front running the Fed. So October the 20th, 1987, that's when the Fed put was born. What we're going to get to today, because I actually believe my title, bigger than Volcker, and I've met Paul Volcker. He's giant. May he rest in peace. But I think that Powell is about to be tighter for longer, higher for longer than even Powell was on a percentage basis. Let's jump in and talk about the implications for high for long in 2024. Immediately, Accounting 101, once a corporation's maturity has a maturity of less than 12 months, it is reclassified as a current liability. That means that the need to refinance debt that's coming due in 2025 is coming in the next few months. And it's going to come fast and furious. As you can see, we ramp up really quickly in 2025. Companies are paying on average at least 40% higher coupons in the last 40 years. But unless you've been investing for 50 years, we've never had a moment of truth in corporate America. The Fed has always taken the interest rate back down to the zero bound to allow corporations to refinance ahead of any type of 40 or 50% increase on their coupons that they pay on their debt. Why is this important? It's important because last year, and there's another slide that I'll get to in a minute, last year only 54% of U.S. office properties that needed to refinance did so successfully. They're saying, I'm going to hold off and extend and wait for the Federal Reserve to lower interest rates to the zero bound and pray God that I make it. Well, guess what? If I'm Jamie Dimon and I have the CEO, CFO, and COO's private accounts in my private bank, and if I do IPOs for companies, and if I do mergers and acquisitions for companies, and if I have a revolving line of credit for companies, I'm going to make sure that I safeguard that relationship with my constrained balance sheet before a relationship that I might or might not have with a building. And what does that mean? That means that the commercial real estate that was not refinanced last year needs to be refinanced this year, and there won't be lenders willing to extend. So CRE, commercial real estate, is going to be subordinated to corporate debt for the first time that corporate debt has had to be refinanced in earnest in 40 years. The rubber's going to hit the road, and it's going to start pretty quickly. This is what I was just saying, 54% of office, 75% of the overall market that needed to refinance did so successfully last year. The companies that are in the greatest crosshairs right now, it's that darling asset class. Be sure and get into a hard asset, multifamily, maybe not, because that is going to be your area of the biggest distress. We have 762,000 apartments coming out of the construction pipeline in 2024, the highest since 1974. Again, the highest number of apartments hitting the market in 50 years in 2024 alone, and every Tom, Dick, and Harry Airbnb jock desperately trying to convert his weekly rental, his short-term rental, to a long-term lease. So that's going to be other rental supply that's going to be joining all the apartments coming online at a time when new home supply is 11 months. So for all the National Association of Realtors chit-chat about we don't have enough housing supply, that narrative's going to be turned on its head this year with an overabundance of supply. And nobody sees this coming. Well, I mean, I do. So the consumer's strong. I've got a few little slides to show you on that theory in a minute. But focus on the fact that credit card distress is higher than it was during the great financial crisis, with an unemployment rate of 3.7%, ladies and gentlemen. That's a very low unemployment rate to have credit card distress where it was during the financial crisis. Remember when Lehman Brothers failed? We thought the world was ending. And yet, U.S. consumers are more stretched today than they were back then. And this does not reflect or even begin to reflect buy now, pay later. December retail sales were strong, Danielle. I know they were. Why? $55.8 billion of credit card debt taken on in 1 month alone, $19 billion in the same month in buy now, pay later. Want to go to a Walmart? Go to a Walmart and use the self-checkout kiosk so that they can save money on labor expenses. And by the way, while you're there, if you have a $400 purchase to make, up to $4,000, you pull up your Affirm app, you apply right there at the self-checkout kiosk, and you get up to $4,000 of buy now, pay later credit instantaneously. Welcome to America. And as you can see, goods demand is, the dark blue line on the left-hand slide, goods demand is well off of its trend line. We're not building another deck. We're not redoing the kitchen again. We're not refurnishing the home again. In fact, a lot of companies are saying, get your happy ass back into the office. So the whole, I work from home because I have that luxury to do so, and therefore I'm going to spend a lot more on goods than I would otherwise. That demand was pulled forward. It ain't coming back. And here we have what I like to call Exhibit A for Gen Y. This is Google searches for give car back. I didn't make those words up. Give car back. It's not a Google search for repossession because 20-year-olds don't know what a repossession is. They just want to know how to get rid of the wheels that they have because they bought a 120,000-mile Toyota Camry. Their loan to value is about 150%. It needs a new transmission, and they just want to give it back. How do I get rid of this thing? And we're 25% lower in terms of headcount for repo men, and it's hard to get repo men because people are running after them and shooting them. So what we're doing as many repossessions per day as we possibly can do. And the other one is can't pay off credit card. But they've already learned from their buddies that they don't have to worry about the fact that they can't pay off their credit cards, which was painfully apparent in Discover Financial, Key Corp, Capital One, Ally Financial. The charge-offs that are being taken by banks and lenders on credit card losses and auto loan losses are biblical in the current earnings season. But you don't have to worry about paying off your credit card. You can buy now, pay later instead. And it does not go anywhere near the credit rating agencies. And the regulators don't know how to catch up with it. But they're trying. Now, there is a cohort of Americans who are in they're in a particularly painful spot. If you hadn't noticed, this lovely man in the White House tries to forgive debt every morning with his Wheaties, along with somebody giving him a memory pill. But there is a cohort of Americans who do not qualify for student loan forgiveness. They make between about $100,000 and $225,000. They're the second highest income earning quintile. The highest earning quintile makes north of $250,000. They don't have student loans. They don't have debt. They don't care. They're responsible for 38% of U.S. consumption. And of course, consumption is 70% of U.S. GDP. But the quintile right underneath them, they're responsible for the next 20% of consumption. And they are in the crosshairs. They make too much money for student loan forgiveness. They have their homeowner's insurance deductible just doubled. Mine did, and we've never put a claim in. But mine doubled. If they're in Florida, even worse. Ground zero U.S. housing market is going to be Florida. It's going to be really ugly. So why wasn't there a recession last year? I get this question asked almost as much as I get the question, why is the stock market up so much? Why wasn't there a recession last year? Well, the employee retention credit Anybody, show of hands, have you seen Kevin O'Leary on TV saying, don't leave the money behind? It's free money. In the month of July 2023, $29.8 billion in cash was directly deposited into the bank accounts of Americans. This entire program, when the CARES Act was signed, was budgeted to be $50 billion. North of $400 billion, we gave people a lot of money. We gave people so much money. Now, we didn't give them as much money as we gave them with the Paycheck Protection Program. As you can see there, when the, that date line should say February 2020 instead of 2023, so I'll have that typo fixed. But what you're looking at are used Rolls-Royce prices, which I can't even say it because we don't really ever, it's not dinner conversation. Hey, what's the Rolls going for today, honey? But the fact is, when $800 billion in Paycheck Protection Program monies were dispersed, the sales of Lamborghinis, McLarens, Rolls-Royces, they all took off. Now, again, I'm going to focus your attention where it says fourth, there. That's that upper quintile that makes between $100,000 and $225,000 a year. You think they have money. Their net worth is lower today than it was prior to the pandemic because they've tacked on a mortgage, an auto loan. Their homeowners insurance is going up. Their property taxes are going up. There's this word that they've been introduced to called escrow, and they want to know who invented it and how to kill them because their mortgage payment's going up even though they've got a mortgage rate that's south of 3%. That particular cohort, again, their net worth is lower than it was prior to the pandemic. Of all of the 3-bedroom plus homes in America, this is new Redfin data that came out last week, 40% are owned by baby boomers. At last check, 60, 70-year-old people are not making babies. But they own twice as many 3-bedroom plus homes as millennials who are in their procreation years. Lennar Homes makes a new build designed for 2 generations. Mom and pop, you're in the basement. You've got your ensuite, as long as the kids do the quid pro quo and agree to make babies, because for God's sake, they're tired of waiting for these grandchildren. So you can buy a new build, or you can invite your kids into your very big, very empty home and move into your own basement. But multi-generational household formation in America has been growing at a very, very fast pace. As you can see, the median age of a first-time home buyer has increased from 29 to 35 years old. Repeat buyers up there in 58. Let me tell you about baby boomers with lots of mortgage debt, but we don't have enough time. Or I would, but there are quite a few of them. This is my favorite. Next time I'm in South Carolina, I'll be asking the state police if they have arrested this person who drove a Lamborghini and had the hubris to have PPP loan as his license plate. You gotta love that. And then we get down to the old Bureau of Labor Statistics, the BLS. I think they need to remove the L and call it a day. In 2023, in the state of New York, the highest service industry state in the nation, there are more, in terms of the percentage of non-farm payrolls of all 50 states plus Washington, D.C., New York has the highest concentration of service working individuals. In 2023, 120% of the jobs created in the state of New York went to support the welfare state, meaning there was a net negative 20% destruction of private sector jobs last year. Now, I'm getting through this really, really fast, and believe it or not, I have not had any caffeine. This is all adrenaline because I've never done a keynote in 20 minutes in my life. So I'm going to be able to slow down for a second and help you appreciate what looks like an upside-down food pyramid. Right? And that's, I'm Italian. We want to eat the carbs, and yet they're at the bottom of the pyramid. And we're supposed to eat the fruits and vegetables at the top, right? Right. It doesn't work that way with this upside-down pyramid. With this upside-down pyramid, you see that 64% of jobs created last year were in healthcare, education, social assistance, government jobs to support the growing welfare state in America, because that's the American dream, and that's how capitalism works. I'm kidding. 17% of the jobs were in leisure and hospitality, very low-paying jobs. 81% of jobs in America created last year were for non-productive means. In terms of high-paying jobs, net negative 1% at the very, very bottom. But yet we see people on Bubble Vision on Friday mornings when payrolls are released. They're going, oh my gosh, job creation, life is good. Well, that's according to one survey, where the survey rates fall into about 30%. The other survey, which creates the unemployment rate, we've seen a very big gap growing between the two. Had 800,000 jobs not been lost in the state of, in the month of December, instead of the 3.7% unemployment rate that was reported, you would have seen 4.1%, and people would have been screaming about cats and dogs living together, Ghostbusters style. But we didn't hear that because 800,000 people dropped out of the US workforce, gave up looking for work. You do a little bit of simple math, numerator, denominator, and all of a sudden, voila, you keep your unemployment rate down. It's good work if you can find it. Add it all up. Add up the negative revisions to non-farm payrolls in 2023. In the month of July, the government reported a surprise positive revision of 99,000 to government job creation, which made July, on an aggregate basis, appear to be a positive revision to non-farm payrolls. But the fact that it was 99,000 of government jobs meant that the private sector actually had a negative 40,000 revision for the month. On average, over the last 12 months, we have seen an average monthly revision of negative 48,000 to non-farm payrolls. You have to go back to 2008 when Lehman fell to see anything of this magnitude. More than 40% of the jobs created were imputed by this cute little birth-death model that suggests to you that business formation is taking off in the midst of the worst bankruptcy cycle since 2010. Be very cautious. I am not a conspiracy theorist. They do, however, occupy my Twitter feed at about 2 a.m. And they tell me every night at 2 a.m. the world's ending tomorrow, Danielle. But I'm not on Twitter at that time. This is not a conspiracy theory. This is government statisticians and bureaucrats whose models are not capturing the essence of the US economy and truly what our economy is doing. This is almost my last slide. You've heard a lot over the past few days about interest rates are not as high as what they were when Paul Volcker was at the head of the Fed. While technically that's correct, if you remember back to any of your math classes that introduced the word delta, the change on a percentage basis, the federal funds rate has been tightened to a greater extent than it was when that great, big, tall, wonderful man, Paul Volcker, raised interest rates. Interest rates on a percentage basis are higher. Does this matter? It does. If you're Joe Q CFO and you've got to refinance debt, and your refinancing cost, your coupon is going to double. It matters a lot. Starting points matter. Deltas matter. They matter a lot. The probability of a first Fed rate cut in the month of March has fallen to 40%. 2 Fridays ago, the market was pricing in 7 rate cuts for the year for 2024. As of last Friday, just a few days ago, that number of rate cuts had fallen to 5 for the full year. If we see Dirty Harry J. Powell at the podium next Wednesday, and he puts on his big boy pants and he's mean, and he says, I said 3, I mean 3, and they're going to be small. If we really only get 0.75% cuts this year, Jay Powell will be a taller man than Paul Volcker. And all he has to do is get to March without a rate cut. And again, markets are pricing in right now a 40% probability of a 25 basis point decrease in the federal funds rate. If he gets past that March meeting, he will have kept interest rates higher for longer than Paul Volcker. An extraordinary feat. And bear in mind, $75 billion rolls off the Fed's balance sheet this month. There will be a lag effect in 18 months from the current tightening. The lag effect does not begin in June of 2022. When the rate hiking cycle began, and magically disappear. The lag effect is dynamic and it rolls. So every $1 billion that rolls off the Fed's balance sheet, which is a form of tightening, is going to be lagged and felt in 18 months. Hence the concern of people who understand what's going on, the danger of the Fed pushing on a string. When they do start to cut interest rates, they're going to be doing so against a momentum wave of tightening that's coming in the aftermath of the tightening that's continuing on through today. Remember that lag effects are dynamic and they roll. What do we have to show for it? What do we have to show for 50% of GDP? 50% of GDP. Ladies and gentlemen, aftermath of the great financial crisis, 9% of GDP spent to save the world after Lehman Brothers failed. After systemic risk came unglued, 9% of GDP. The entirety of the New Deal, which at last check, the Hoover Dam's still there. We built stuff with the New Deal. The entirety of the New Deal was 40% of GDP. In the aftermath of the pandemic, the US government has spent 50% of GDP on nothing. Not a damn thing. We threw our kids out of school. Their scores are plummeting. Crime rates are increasing. And we spent 50% of GDP handing cash away for no reason at all, for no productive means. We do not have another Hoover Dam. We have some infrastructure spending that's occurred, some. But we gave away a lot of money. In 2021, do you remember Christmas in your neighborhood? Did you go to your nice mall? Was there a line around the Gucci store? Dallas, Texas, Highland Park, I walked by the Chanel store. There was a line around the Rolex store. There was a line around the Chanel store. The money was spent and then some for no productive means at all. Shame on our government. Truly, truly, truly shame on our government. Shame on Trump, shame on Biden. They were in a foot race to spend more than one another. Don't you forget it. And with that happy note, I will thank you for your time this afternoon.